everybody, to this week's edition of Inside the GM Studio, a podcast all about the tabletop RPG hobby. I am your host, Matt.
And I am David.
And so much to talk about, so many things happen. I want to talk about our Barbarians of Mirror game yesterday, which was pretty much our first full game.
Yeah.
As well as my Conquest, the free RPG day on Saturday.
Oh, shit, I forgot that was on Saturday.
Yeah. There's a couple people that I talked to, and they're like, fuck, I forgot. But yeah, let's start with our game yesterday. David's, we can count the game that Cody and I started, where it was just the two of us. But I think that was more of a primer. I felt like the one yesterday was a little bit more of a fuller game. Even, I was totally cool with it because I was having fun listening. The first hour was pretty much just Patrick doing his thing, being initiated into the adventure and into the game. Had a good time with that, and then it was a good mix. I think this system also, I don't know, maybe it is the system because it's so light. I think Cody and I have become a little bit more role play free. We're having inter party role play a little bit more. I know that's not really Patrick's bag, but I like what's kind of going on right now with it. But how do you feel about the first, what I am going to consider the first real full game?
Well, a couple things. One, yeah, I need to kind of get Patrick a little bit more into the spirit of the game. It was like, perhaps it was because it was, let me back up. The scenario was pretty railroaded, and that was on purpose because I'm trying to kind of just get the players together, give you a scenario that is kind of quick and easy. So if you notice, there was not a lot of like lore and texture. I tried to do a little bit of the like world building in the first chapter, that Patrick wasn't really there for, but I tried to set the stage for a little bit of the area that you were in. But it's, supposed to be kind of flattened. There's not a lot of like nuance or complexity or layers of the plot to unravel. There was a couple of like, whoa, this is a surprise, like plot twists. But I didn't want it to be too overwrought. I wanted to be able to get through it last night. And frankly, Patrick's intro was meant to just be kind of like a quick and high tension thing. And he gets to this grate and he kind of enters with a bang, but he's just so used to being like Mr. Cautious.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, like I get in here and I try to like, whatever. And it's like, really, I was trying to be like, dude, you're not going to fucking kill this thing. Right? Like, this is like, what are you doing? You're just going to try to like sit here and just like, he's just being so, oh, well, it can't get me through the grate. Can I stab it with my sword? I just keep stabbing it and stabbing it and stabbing it and stabbing it and stabbing it until I kill it. And then it's like, and then what? You're going to get out and what? Go back into the town and like, it was just like, look, this is like a literal escape hatch. You would think you would just kind of avail yourself to it, but he's just not necessarily in the spirit of the game yet.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out a way to like incentivize that. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna like, he's just gonna sit here in a completely static scene, rolling dice until he gets the like result that he wants. And that's going to be incredibly boring
Yeah.
because like for the rest of the players and for me and for him, it's just going to be like, all right, what you killed this monster. Okay, great. Now what? Like, what are you going to do? You have no other direction because the game's railroaded. You have no other direction. The one guy that you were with is dead, and like you're on the outskirts of town. What are you even intending to do? Like it's like, okay, and then it's like he kills the monster, and then I'm like, oh, and then you hear like the rumble down, and I go down the chute. Then it's like, couldn't you have just done that to begin with? It was just
Yeah,
kind of
right.
like irritated. It was like, geez, dude. So as a result, the game ran long, and I could tell by the time we got to the end that you were pretty fucking tired.
Yeah. Very much so.
So I don't know. Maybe we need to start like splitting the difference instead of 4 or 6, starting at 5, and then maybe give you time to get a little bit of a nap in. I don't know if that would be better.
That's what I used to
But
do when we played really late. I would try to get a nap in during the day.
right, and now it
Sometimes it would
seems like
happen, sometimes it wouldn't.
but it seems like now we don't play. We used to play like 5 or 6 hours, and now
Mm,
we play 4, maybe 5 hours. And we used to start at 6, and now we start at 4. And it's like now we're playing less time, and we're starting earlier. But it seems like it's more frequent that you're tired at the end of the game, and I think it's
yeah,
because you don't have time to get a nap in
it's
now,
true.
right?
Yeah, it is.
So,
That's true.
so we might be able to split that difference. But overall, I was fairly satisfied with kind of how the game played out. Um, I thought it was thematically on point. I thought there was moments of excitement and drama. I liked that in particular, Cody didn't seem to have any compunction about like spending his fucking hero points for shit.
Nope.
Um, and you kind of had a couple in the hopper, but it's like, yeah, they're there to be spent, and it
Hmm.
seems like you would use that. Like, I don't think Patrick used a single one.
No.
Um,
But I made sure to hold at least one because I had a feeling. I just had this inkling because I was rolling too good.
yeah,
While Patrick and Cody weren't, I was like, I'm going to be the first one to fall unconscious here.
yeah,
So I need to make sure to hold a hero point to make sure that I can, what is it, shake off death or whatever it's called?
yeah, defy death, yeah.
Defy death. That's it.
And so, yeah, like, was that your last one to use that, or did you
No,
still
I
have
got
one?
two left.
Ah, okay. So either way, so I liked that. I'm not super familiar with the magic mechanic, so I was just kind of trying to do some of that on the fly with the priest guy. I don't think that went so well, but it probably doesn't make too much of a difference,
Hmm.
for purposes of the story. I was just hoping like, you guys didn't think I was just kind of firing from the hip with some nonsense, because the magic mechanic is it's kind of nebulous in this game, and it kind of leaves you. And I'm not super familiar with how it works, and I probably should have just strayed away from having a magic user in the first scenario. But all things considered, I thought there was a decent amount of, fighting, a little bit of exploration, a little bit of mystery, a little bit of dialogue, and
Hmm.
that was cool for, a one-shot session stretched over 2 sessions. I felt like it went pretty okay. Hopefully, it gave the players a little bit of an appetite for the game. I'll be a little more thoughtful about future sagas and try to bake in a little bit more decision making, role playing, now that you have an idea of kind of what the world is about, what the pacing is supposed to be like, how the combat plays out, and that sort of thing. So,
So you told us yesterday after the game that we'll deal with XP and all that next week.
mhm.
But can you give me, because I haven't read about XP and advancement in the book yet.
Oh,
Are you well up on it yet?
yeah, yeah, I know how it works. It's pretty simple. So basically, the player, it's kind of like more like a VTM award, where it's like, generally speaking, you get 1 point for just completing a quest. Then you typically get a second point if you were fairly successful at whatever you set out to complete. So, like, for instance, if you were unsuccessful, it wouldn't have been any less cool. So, like, what would have happened is, if you were unsuccessful, then the priest guy would have raised this weird, like, shadow smoke demon that none of you have, because none of you have magic, you
Yeah.
would not have had the capabilities to fight.
Hmm.
And that would have been very evident very fast. So you would have just had to flee while this big demon monster just takes over and destroys the city. And you probably would have just ended up on like a hillside watching the city fall into ruins and just been like, all right, I guess we got to go find another quest to get some gold, right? Like, that's a very sword and sorcery
Yeah.
ending as well.
On
Um,
to the next one then.
right, right. I mean, that happens sometimes. And so, but because you were successful, you would probably typically get a second point. Then you could get a third point. Typically would come is, I'll ask you how you spend your treasure. And if you come up with something that is really entertaining as to like how you spend your treasure, because your spending treasure is basically what your reputation is.
Mm.
Like, no one besides the party was there on the altar with the cult and the, demon dog or whatever. And so all the people of the town really know is that you suddenly have a ton of money. And it's like, presumably your stories must have some validity. If you say, oh yeah, we went into this ancient temple and there was all these monsters in there and shit, there's all this gold everywhere. And you come back with a giant chest of gold, and we're like, oh, maybe that guy is telling the truth, right? He must be a badass. He came back alive. No one has ever done that before.
Mm.
Um, So that's how you spread your reputation. So if you do a good job, an entertaining job, especially if whatever description you give gives me a little bit of a hook for another adventure, like then you could earn a third point if it was particularly epic or heroic. Then you might earn like a fourth point of experience points per saga. And so typically that's the way it goes. You're going to probably earn somewhere between 1 and 4 points for any saga. Then you can spend advancement to up your attributes, to up your skills, or to buy boons, or to get rid of flaws. And they're just like in VTM, there's static costs. So like whatever you're buying an advancement level in, that's how much it costs. Like if you're going from 1 to 2, then it costs you 2 experience points. And if you're
Oh,
going
okay.
from 2 to 3, it goes 3. And you max out, I think, at 5. You can't have a 5 attribute and anything higher.
Yeah.
Um,
Unless
and
you
so
have a
you can
boon. If you have a boon, it can go up to 6.
Some of them, yeah. Some
Yeah.
boons give you the ability to up it to 6, but those are pretty rare. And then you can buy off flaws. You can buy new careers, and typically those careers would be kind of reflective of whatever you're adventuring. Like, if you're going to buy a career in thief, then presumably the previous quest or two or saga like involved you doing some thief shit,
You
and
were
so
doing some thievy shit.
you were doing some thievy shit. And so you can buy careers like that to kind of expand your scope of skills and the ways in which you would use them. But beyond that, I don't think there's really anything else you can use your XP on. It's just kind of improving your attributes, buying boons, buying off flaws, or buying careers. So it's
Mm.
all pretty straightforward. And so I like that about it, that it makes it easy for you to spend a pool of resources that you have or save up a pool of resources that you have. It's not like a crisp level system where you're getting more hit points, getting more
Right.
abilities. You're just kind of building on what you already have and
Mm.
sharpening those skills. So,
This is mostly just going to be for you and me because I found this the other day and I was like, oh, I got to show Dave. Check out what I found.
oh snap, that's like the
Yeah.
OG
You
fucking
remember
set
that
of
guy?
dice.
For those listening, I'm holding up a D8 that is the very first dice set that David had when I
Yeah.
joined him or when he taught me D&D.
I
I think
think
that's
it was
the
the very first dice set that I ever owned.
I
Like,
think
full stop.
I gave the D20 to shit, was it I don't remember if it was someone here or not, but I think I separated the pieces cuz I only had the D20, the D12, 4 and 8. And I think I have the 4 and 8 left. So I don't know what I did with the 12 or the 20. I can't remember if I gave them out or if I did anything with them. But there was a point where I was just giving away all of my dice.
It, interesting, interesting fact, or perhaps interesting, given most people's propensity toward dice ownership, is so at this point, I have more dice,
Mm,
mostly because they've come with a variety of starter sets that I've
yeah.
bought.
Mm,
So I have more now. And then also, some of my old players have just kind of left their dice in my in with my like supplies when we were playing tabletop. And then my girlfriend bought a set of dice, and they're just kind of in there too. But up until fairly recently, or not even until fairly recently, unless you're counting starter sets, I've only ever bought 4 sets of dice.
hmm
Those ones that you had, those red and black ones that I had for probably the longest amount of time. I had those dice that are just solid red, like the
Yeah.
color of your shirt with black letters. I had those for years, and it was the only set of dice all the way up until I like lived till I moved out of Ann Arbor. It was the only set of dice I had. And then I bought a metal set of dice, and then I have like that gray and black set of dice, the one that I use for the
Yeah.
community question. Those are the only 4 sets of dice I've ever bought,
Mm.
unless you count the ones that came with starter sets. And I feel like that's a really, for somebody that's been gaming 30 years, that's that's a pretty good wrangle. Most people like every couple of years, like I got a new set of dice. I got these ones. I got these ones over here for this, and like this. I need a new set of dice for like every character I get. It's like, geez.
Yeah. Yeah. If it wasn't for some of my other players that did the same thing, that they went to run games and I joined them, they would buy all the players a set of dice. So I have some from those. The gelatinous cube soap that I had that we got at that convention that we went to.
Hmm.
And then yeah, like I think I still have two sets that I actually bought.
Hmm.
Because we were playing fifth edition and I was like, I want two D20s for advantage.
Yep.
And I like to have full sets of dice when I use them. But everything else, I have like probably 11 other sets from starter sets.
It's yeah, it's like it's what's funny is that if you're a player, you only ever need really one set of
Yeah.
dice.
Hmm.
And as a GM, like you could, because sometimes you'll be rolling like say dragon's breath weapon, and you're like it's like 8d10,
Hmm.
and you're not going to roll individually. But I always had players that just had a glut of dice.
Hmm.
Remember, we used to just have like a giant fucking bowl in the middle of the
Oh
table that
yeah.
just had like all the miscellaneous dice in it.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, or like, geez, like, remember when we were playing VTM? Like, what did we have? Something like 60 D10s
We had
or
a
something like that. Because
lot. I think it was more than 60.
it was just a ton of them. And we just pulled them all together. Like, this giant bowl of,
Hmm.
but yeah, so it's like you could need to have that many dice if you're a GM, like, several sets. But I never really had that because I always just had players that were really excited about having dice,
Hmm.
which I mean, I get it. Dice are cool, but
Yeah, man, they go click clack and
yeah, well, no,
they're
yeah, those
fun.
metal ones especially are very satisfying to roll.
I know. I have my Shadowrun metal dice.
Yeah.
I love these fucking things, man.
Oh yeah, they're pretty good.
They're
They're
good
good.
ones.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about the beauty that was Free RPG Day yesterday.
Do it.
Uh, Only because I swear every year that I went out for Free RPG Day, I looked at the website and there was like maybe two stores near me that were participating, and they'd be on the opposite ends of
Hmm.
town. And sometimes I'd have to go out to Garden City, or a bunch of places that were at least 45 minutes away from me. This year, fuck no, I found all sorts of new game stores that are really close to me that I went to. I went to four before I quit, because then I just started seeing way more duplicates of what I was getting, and I just decided to piss off. Didn't even make it to Vault of Midnight. I just went to all the new ones that I've never been to, and I will definitely be going to.
Crazy.
Some of the ones I was looking forward to getting, I got. I think I got damn near everything that was available because I. So here,
Talking to the mic.
hold on. I'm getting
Talking
there.
to the mic.
Man, hold on. I said hold on. So this is the stack I got.
Noise.
It is a chunky stack.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 different supplements.
Are any of them adventures?
The majority of them are adventures.
Are any of them barbarians of Lumura adventures?
No. But there's some in here that
Then I don't care. I don't care then. Next segment.
the ones I was looking forward to. The new edition of Basic Role Playing, Quick Start Guide. I always love having anything from Chaosium up on my shelf in my collection. This one I was super excited about. Big Eye Small Mouth Primer. I've always wanted. I've always
It's
been
a
intrigued.
Japanese anime role-playing game, I'm guessing.
It's not Japanese, but it is an anime
Yeah.
game. At least I don't think it's. Is it? Oh, it is. Japanime Games.
Japanime.
But I've always been intrigued by Big Eyes Small Mouth, or BESM as they have on here. I've just never looked into it, and now I have something that I can put up on my shelf and say I have something of Big Eyes Small Mouth. I was super excited to try out these guys here. There was two that are for the City of Mist system. And I've never looked into City of Mist. I've just heard a lot of people talk about how awesome it is. And then I read through these things, and it's a goddamn narrative system that I just cannot get into. Yet again.
This free thing you gave me is stupid.
Yeah. Of course, some more Arkham Horror. You gotta love Arkham Horror. These are the ones that I thought you might like. The Well of Shadows. Ooh. These are all 5e, of course, adventures. This one here, I gotta read and see what it's like. What is this? Grim Hollow. The game is actually called Grim Hollow, In the Beast's Wake. Yeah, more 5e adventures, as well as some new stuff. Got some stuff for Starfinder, Nightfell. I really want to read this because this is something brand new coming out. This Nightfell game. Really want to
Hmm.
check that out. Some Pathfinder Second Edition, and then some other stuff that's just come out this year. Some really good stuff at Free RPG Day this year.
Chaosium, Pathfinder, Lucky.
And also, because of Free RPG Day, usually the stores will have some sort of sale going on. And I
Mm.
hit a grail for me because I can never find it in any other store. No stores carry this. I've always said I wanted it. It's always sold out online, and they had one copy left at one of the new locations I went to. It was 10% off. I got my Final Fantasy 14 tabletop RPG hard copy,
Nice.
and I love this thing.
Very excited.
It is. I don't know if you could tell the difference on how tall it is.
It looks
The
huge.
book is really tall, but it's like an eighth of an inch shorter or skinnier than our normal books.
Well, you're also probably just used to the fucking Savage Worlds book or whatever. It's like it fits in your
Oh,
pocket.
yeah. Here you go. So
It's
that's
yeah, that's well. It's
being
like I showed
even.
you the Barbarians of Lemura book is like the ratio on it is just
Yeah.
fucking weird. Like it's a soft cover book, but it's just like it's a weird size. I don't know
Hmm.
why.
But yep, I can't wait for next year now that I know, and because I have all these stores near me. Bank account's
Uh-oh.
gonna be sad.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's get away from bank accounts going to be sad and let's get into a little bit of news that's been going on.
It's just in.
Oh, David, you know how I love good conspiracies and all that, right?
Oh, they're fun.
Uh, newest thing comes out. There's no conspiracy about this at all. But everybody had some things to say. So recently, I think I even talked about on the show here, Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins retired from Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast. These are two guys that built and made Fifth Edition, and of course, everyone was just like, "Hey, good for them. They're finally reaching their time. They want to get out of there and uh, go enjoy their retirement. That's fucking great." Well, uh, not even like a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, I saw Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins joins Darrington Press and the Daggerfall. What is it?
Heart.
Daggerheart
Yeah.
team. So they join the Critical Role crew to start working on Daggerheart stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody came out right away and was just like, "Oh, they fucking left the devil and they wanted to go work with the new hot shit." Well, if you actually go in and read this article, that's on the Los Angeles Times. Uh, don't let them. They're gonna want to try to get money out of you here, but don't let them. Just like, hey, support us, get a subscription to LA Times. No, no, no. I just wanted to read this one. This has some really good stuff in it. They were talking about Chris and Jeremy were talking about they were just going to, go and enjoy their retirement, but they wanted to leave Seattle and move back down to California. And when they made that known to their friend group, I think it was Travis Willingham from Critical Role and Darrington Press and all that. I think he reached out to them and said, "Hey, if you guys are moving back to California, why don't you come, play with us? We can use some of your expertise. We just launched this new game ourselves." And they said yes, of course. They were like, "Hey, why
I'm
can't
sure they
we?"
dumped an entire dump truck full of money in their lap too, so
Yes.
that probably helped.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sure that happened. Uh, and now both of them have talked about how they can't wait to start working uh, on new games and new systems,
Hmm.
which a lot of people kind of skimmed over, but didn't realize until much later that they said that they aren't going to be working on Daggerheart fully, that they're going to make their own games as well, which I think is a fantastic idea, at least for Jeremy Crawford. Chris Perkins, I think he should just be working on story stuff.
Hmm.
because that's where he excels. He's the guy that he wrote Curse of Strahd, uh, which I still say to this day is the best fifth edition adventure out there.
It's the best D&D adventure, full stop.
Yeah,
Like any edition.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I think he
Sorry,
should just
previous editions. Curse of Strahd dunks on you.
yeah. I think he and Matt Mercer should just lock themselves in a closet with a bottle of whiskey and a couple notepads, and just start working on. But they don't want world and lore for Daggerheart. So maybe he'll just make his own. Maybe he'll be like he'll be Matt Mercer and all theirs Ed Greenwood.
It's who you don't need good world and lore if you have good stories.
Mm-hmm.
You can fill in the lore as it like comes along. You don't need like I get really tired of this whole concept that you need to have like an entire fleshed out world, like every plot beat for the last 1,000 years of every corner of the world and every significant monument and significant event, but to illustrate meaningful stories to the characters on a micro scale. Like it just you can they don't need all that up front. It's like how much like when you sit down to read a book, like even a fantasy book, and I know that this is a thing in fantasy books, but how much do you want to sit through like 25 pages of world building before you get to like the inciting incident? Like,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you rather just get to the plot and then like when the things that are relevant to the plot come up about wars, about like royal families or whatever, then they kind of give that to you? This is what Game of Thrones does fucking immaculately well.
Mm-hmm.
Like doesn't need you to like sit through 3 episodes of world building. It just throws you into the world, and you're like, oh shit, there's like these thing called White Walkers now. Why is that important? Oh, because there's this place called the Wild North that we just learned is a thing that contextualizes it. Like, oh, who is this bitch that's got blonde hair? And oh, apparently she's part of some old like family, and we learn this because of the way the characters talk about her and talk about her off screen, and it's yeah, like we could have sat through a giant long-winded lore dump about that, but who wants that? Like I don't need that. Like just give me some stories that are good, get me invested in the characters and the drama, and then give me the lore that bolsters that as like frosting on a cake sort of situation. So like and Chris Perkins would do that down to the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited for it because I am a lore guy. I love that's what I like to do in the meantime between games. So I learn the lore of the world. That's why I was saying that he might be his Ed Greenwood, because we wouldn't have Forgotten Realms if it wasn't for Ed Greenwood. We have an email from a listener, from old Tim, as Tim writes in asking about homebrew rules. Says, "Hey fellas,
Hey, Tim.
hey Tim, uh, I've been interested in making my own homebrew mechanics for quite a while now, but I've always hesitated as I don't know how to do it without breaking the entire game. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard on a few episodes of yours that you guys have talked about your own homebrews, so I wondered what is your processes when you're coming up and with these homebrew mechanics, and how do you know that they aren't going to completely ruin the game? Any little tips help, as I want to just kind of dabble in it a little bit and not get too crazy, but I want to make it fun for my group, as well as myself as a GM that likes to have fun and watch the group have fun. I think a little bit of homebrew throws a little bit of that in there. Thanks for all the help, Tim."
Yeah, this is a question I think a lot of GMs struggle with. Um, So I guess it's important to know, like, if he's listened to the show before, this is probably a little redundant, but just in case, I don't want to make the assumption that any listener listens to like every single episode. They
Mm.
probably choose episodes that seem interesting to them, and then they skip a couple weeks or they tune out for a month or two. So if this isn't instructive, then I guess just feel free to refer to my previous notes. Um, but anytime you're considering a rule, that could include building a rule, which you might include as a homebrew rule, or tinkering with a rule that already exists.
Mm.
Both of which I would say are kind of under the umbrella of homebrew. You need to first ask yourself what the rule is trying to achieve. And if it's the case of tinkering with an existing rule, where that existing rule is falling short. So if it's falling short in some way, then you go, okay, I need to tinker with something. And as a general rule for rules, a rule of thumb for rules, as it were, try to tinker an existing rule before creating a new rule, because creating a new rule is always more tricky because you have trouble anticipating what the likely consequences are. So, that said, you need to establish like what is the intent? Like where is it falling short and what do I want it to achieve? And the answers to those questions are likely to lie in what sort of style of play you want to have in your game. I just alluded to earlier in the show about Barbarians of Lemura is supposed to be a kind of narrative that is fast paced, dangerous, where the characters make snap, bold decisions and go all in as risk takers, and they're heroic and they're trying these magnificent feats and occasionally failing hard, but their grit and determination are what win the day through their skills. And if your rules aren't set up in a way that communicates that you want that from the players, then the rules aren't going to be doing that and you're not going to get those results that you want. So, if you're tinkering with a rule, then first of all, the best way is to kind of think through, is this serving the tone and tenor and goals of my campaign? Whether that's theme, whether it's motif, whether it's pacing. Sometimes like for instance, hex crawl shit in classic D&D is just fucks with the pacing of your game.
Mm-hmm.
Hourly random encounter checks just fucking slog down the goddamn pacing of your game. And if you're trying to if you're into a more like slow plotting kind of tactical, not even tactical, strategic approach to a game where it's thoughtful and kind of like a slowly plotting ship, then maybe that's great. Maybe hourly checks, but so it doesn't even need to be tone and motif and theme. It could just very well just be pacing. Um, then another important thing would be like how it plays into the characters in the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like who would be using it, coming up with a mechanic that is like, I really don't like the way that I would really prefer spell points to spell slots. And I like the spell points more because they address X, Y, and Z. And you have a party of like, you know, barbarians and fighters and rogues. It's like, well, is this really necessary? Is it really, who is it for? And
Mm-hmm.
like, what is it for? Who is it for? What is it for? And in what way does the existing rule have a gap in it where you might need to inject a certain particular type of rule? Or how can you tinker with an existing rule? And how to go about doing that, I have some thoughts on, but I wanted to let Matt kind of weigh in on this aspect of it first.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to side on your uh, do a side by fucking hell, add to the side of one of the topics you brought up, the tone and who's it for. I like this because many uh, times when I make up homebrew, I'm a big fan of heroic fantasy. I want
Hmm.
the characters to feel super badass about what they do. So I just recently made a change uh, that I'm gonna do with all my D&D Fifth Edition uh, groups again, and maybe even farther. Who knows if this keeps working? But I just found out about this homebrew that they do for spellcasters to make them feel that little extra badass. And I always love this anyway. Uh, I'm a fan of the body might suffer from over spellcasting. I've always liked that.
Hmm.
But now they have, if you have 0 spell slots and you want to be, the savior, everybody's dropping around you, and you just need to drop one last fireball. Um, so it's you take 1 point of fatigue per the level of the spell you cast. That's all it is, and I think that is just enough that it gives them an extra boost of power, but it also can take it takes away uh, an equal amount from the character. a
Yeah,
friendly
and
player.
so it just you need to understand the operational parameters of like the implications that it has in your game. If it's not going to address a concern, sometimes you just I know I've been guilty of this where I come across a neat mechanic and I think it's neat and I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, that's novel and I haven't really thought of a game that really uses it in this way or like the light side dark side points in the
Hmm.
proprietary dice for the Star Wars is a very neat concept. And despite my problems with that game overall, I think that system, that mechanic works for that game.
Hmm.
I don't think it would work for other games as well. So just because you get in love with a mechanic or you get an idea in your head as to how to homebrew something doesn't necessarily make it a good idea. You need to be asking like, what are the uses of this rule? How frequently are they likely to come up? What is the impact? Does it does it add to? You always want a rule to add to theme, motif, tone, character,
Hmm.
setting, pacing, the elements of your story. And if it's not doing that, then there's really no need for it. And if there's as soon as you start adding mechanics that there are no need for, then your game very quickly just gets bogged down with a whole slew of house rules and home brews, and then you start just kind of having like a hodgepodge, and it gets just real difficult to manage. And unless you're building a mechanic system from scratch, which is, if I understand the question, is not what he's asking. Like
Nope.
building a mechanic system from scratch is a way difficult thing to do.
Mm.
But just like a homebrew rule, you need to think about the implications for other rules because what you won't realize until it's too late if you're not thoughtful about it is that some elements of the rule that you're changing touch other rules
Yep.
and now
I was
you've
gonna.
changed.
Yeah, I was gonna. That was gonna be my first point of the negative, is that
Yeah,
I've found that out in person before. Uh,
yeah, and
it,
it can have implications that you don't want it to have because you realize it touches other mechanics, and then those mechanics touch other mechanics, and now suddenly you're under this snowball of you've altered the fabric of the game.
mhm.
And most rules that you might be homebrewing or injecting a new rule into kind of make themselves evident fairly quickly, right? Like the rules for mounted combat in D&D are pretty vague. They're not super specific, so you can, and given that it's not something that many other rules reference, you probably could and should feel free to kind of homebrew any rules in there that work for your campaign. In particular, if you have, maybe a campaign where fighting on horseback is a big thing. It's lots of knights and cavalry and shit like that. That can work perfectly well. But if you're talking about a mechanic for like instance that's in the spellcasting chapter, it's like spells touch almost everything in the game.
Mhm.
Or if it's in the core mechanics of the combat system, you might want to think a little more carefully about what you're tinkering with there because these are things that touch, have far-reaching consequences in the game. So that would be kind of priority number two is to think about what it's touching and what are the hierarchy. From what I can tell, there's probably three tiers of things that are like core mechanics that touch a lot, things that are like special use,
Mhm.
like class powers and stuff like that. And then things that are kind of a little more esoteric. And then you might even have like things that are just like deep cuts rules that hardly ever come up. But like for instance, a lot of people drink a potion is a use object or a
Yeah.
bonus action instead of an action. And that's just because when you think through it, you go like, well, it seems to be that the intent is just that drinking a potion gives you hit points back, and so do spells. And often spells that give you hit points back are an action, or anything that gives you hit points back is a big benefit. So you should have to use an action. But then, from a logical sense, it makes no sense. You're drinking 4 ounces of fluid, which even the description of your use object says that you can do as a use object. You could drink a whole flagon of wine according to the rules. And so it makes no sense that it would just because it's giving you hit points. And I've used this example because it's the simplest one that gets an ease of change. And it also kind of begins to examine the rules as they're intended, as in their implications for the game, and as opposed to what makes the most sense for the world, right? Like most people don't have much trouble understanding that if your character is going to fire a ballista or a catapult, that is going to take an action because it's just a lot of effort,
Yeah.
right? It's a lot of effort to like load a ballista, and so and on top of that, if you hit something with it, it's probably going to cause a shitload of damage. But I always use the example of like, let's just pretend what's at issue is flipping a lever, right? You flip a lever, and under most circumstances, if you flipped a lever that lifted a gate, it would almost certainly be a use object. But if you suddenly flipped a lever that like dumped 1,000 pounds of rocks on an enemy that was likely to kill everybody in the room, that would be a huge boon and a huge damage output. So from the intention standpoint, like, well, it's doing a lot of damage, so it should be an action. But from a logical standpoint, it makes no sense. It doesn't make a difference what the lever does. It's like pushing a button. If
Yeah.
pushing a button causes the Death Star to vaporize someone, it's the same amount of effort as if the pushing the button causes a door to open on the Death Star, right? Like pushing a button is pushing a button. And so when you think about it in those terms for the drinking a potion, it's like, well, that makes more sense. And it doesn't really break the game in any huge way unless you're just really raining out healing potions on your party left and right. But that would be the kind of the second consideration is how it slots into the impacts. And I have a final point on this, but I'm going to let Matt interject any thoughts he has on that now too.
No, I love that you brought up the that one that one rule because it is that I think they changed it in the 2024 rules. I might be wrong because I haven't read that thing in a long time, but I remember so many people they talked about it, like Jeremy Crawford and some people talked about it. So many people fucking homebrewed this to that it was use object or whatever. That they were just like, fuck it, we're just going to change the rules.
Yeah.
Might as well.
I mean, it makes, in some things you could see going either way. And if you can really see something going one way or another, that's when you really want to think hard about what the implications are. So like, for instance, some rules like, well, why is mounting a horse half of your movement? That doesn't seem right. But you can, as part of your movement, you can jump up onto a table, right? Or jump up onto a bar. You can do that as part of your movement. It might be difficult terrain, but it's not half your movement to hop up on the bar. And if you're a trained rider, getting on a horse is pretty fucking quick and easy.
Or who the fuck stands up so slow it takes up half your movement?
Right. It takes up half your movement because it's like, well, I mean, I don't know. You could argue it either way. Like standing up is a pretty easy endeavor. It's like, yeah, but we don't know what it's like to stand up with like fucking plate mail on, right? You know what I mean? And a backpack full of gear and a weapon in our hand where we're trying to defend ourselves so we're just thinking like, well, popping up off the ground. But it's like in a battle scenario, you wouldn't be so cavalier about getting up. It would be dangerous, because you're on the ground. So you have to do so carefully and cautiously. But at the same time, it's like the sheer mechanics of it seem like it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I've watched enough martial arts movies to watch them. They just, from their back, they kick up, and the next thing you know, they're on their feet and running.
Right, yeah. And it's like, but you can't have different rules for monks and rogues than you do for fighters and barbarians, right?
Yeah,
You're going to go, okay, there has to just be one unilateral rule. And I could see the same thing for, in our campaign, I made making a ranged attack with an adjacent enemy provokes an opportunity attack. It's not disadvantage. You make the attack at normal, but you provoke an opportunity attack. And I think the same argument could be made for drawing a weapon. If you don't have a weapon drawn and someone's standing next to you with a sword and you go to draw your weapon, it seems like they could just slash at you and fucking hurt you pretty easily. It's the reason you see in movies that people have like a sword drawn on a guy or a crossbow in his face. It's like he doesn't go for his sword and just be like, "Oh, now we're in initiative and it's time to fight." It's like because that guy will shoot you in the neck with an arrow blast and kill you, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh.
but if you wanted a more heroic and kind of video game like experience, that would be perfectly fine. But if you're
Mm.
going for a more dark and gritty kind of like realistic, then you might want to consider changing that rule, and that goes back to the tone and everything. So,
Mm-hmm.
as my final point on this front, hopefully the first 2 points were not too blended together and long-winded, but as a final point, I would say when you get down into thinking about the actual mechanics of it, and if you've been thoughtful about what purpose it serves, then you need to be thinking about what result you're trying to get. And um, that might seem like the same thing as the previous point, but I can kind of illustrate the difference. If you say the purpose of a rule is to make the game more fast-paced and heroic, okay, great. And I'm going to change this rule. And then you go, well, what's the purpose of the rule? Well, the purpose of the rule, the reason for it is to make the game more fast-paced and heroic. But in a concrete way, what I'm doing is I'm making the characters cause more damage.
Mm.
And if they cause more damage, then they'll kill enemies quicker. And if they kill enemies quicker, it'll speed up encounters. So you see the kind of difference there.
Mm.
And what I'm getting at with this is when you think about the actual concrete mechanics, you need to think about the range of possibilities. So, what possible outcome you're trying to achieve needs to be thought of at least in three ways. What's the upper end threshold? What's the lower end threshold? And what's the median or average threshold?
Mm-hmm.
This often comes up when you're building mechanics for
Uh-oh. There he is.
all right, here I am. Sorry. Um, with new mechanics, often what happens is you might think of the upper threshold, right? Like I want the upper threshold. Oh, like D&D, it goes to 20. So I'll do a 2d10. That also goes to 20. It's like, right, but what you don't realize is you're not thinking about the like distribution of
Yeah.
odds.
Uh-huh.
The lower end is now 2 instead of 1, and
Mm-hmm.
also it's not a flat bell curve. Like a d20 is 5% chance of each number, but you need to be thinking about like, well, what's the average result and what's the top end and what's the bottom end. And what you don't realize, man, is this can really fuck with you when you're just like, okay, I want to be able to have a range like this. And you go, well, here's the range that I can get. And you go, okay, like I can have, all right, yeah, I'll do 2d12, right? And you're like, okay, but now the upper end is 24. And you go like, okay, so now that means what percent of people would have like if you get a 24, how much overkill is that for someone that has like the highest defense you could imagine? Are there characters that have 24 defense? If so, that seems weird. Or are there characters that just have defense up to 20 or armor class up to 20? You need to be thinking about it in a push and pull scenario.
Yep.
The metrics that it's going up against
You just took the
armor
words out of
class.
my mouth.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the push and pull of it all.
Yeah, and so this often we don't think about things in those terms necessarily. And so it might be a statistical distribution of dice, but it also might be an economy of action, like in the case of the healing potion situation that I illustrated earlier. That's an economy of action thing. It's like, okay, makes the game more survivable because now characters can drink a potion as a use object. And so most of the homebrew rules that I've put in place in my D&D game were to make the game faster but more survivable for the characters. The bottom floor of like there's so many
Mm.
rungs between when the characters like get hurt to when they die. I've provided opportunities for them to do a variety of different things. But the reason I did that is because I wanted there to be fewer combat encounters, but for those combat encounters to be harder. So it's like because I've given the players more tools at their disposal to survive, now I can really just hammer the shit out of them with really difficult encounters. Like there are very few easy to even like moderate encounters. Like every once in a while, like 1 out of 5 encounters in my campaign is probably moderate difficulty. The rest of them are hard and deadly. Like that's just like all I put in there. And so that's just like the kind of game that I want to run with like fewer combat encounters that like matter more. Um, but if you didn't want that, if you wanted there to be, say, a more crunchy, grindy kind of experience where the players are managing resources over long arcs, then lots of little encounters. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts, like kind of a die-hard situation. Then you would just tinker with it in accordingly. You make things a little more deadly.
Hmm.
Maybe give goblins like maximum hit points, or don't roll for their damage, just give them maximum damage or whatever. You
Oh,
could
that's a
do
good
any,
one. I
yeah,
didn't even, that's a good one.
you could just do plenty of things. Again, rolling slows the game down. So if you want to speed the game up, then just do average damage or
Mm.
whatever. But you need to think about the implications both on both ends of the spectrum, the upper end and the lower end, and then the median too, the middle,
Yep.
at the very least. But you'd ideally be thinking about the entire continuum of like iterations, because again, like a 2d10 or 2d12 like system, if you're using that 2d6, you could think, okay, average is 7, upper is 12, lower is 2, but then you also need to probably think about like, well, what does that distribution of like numbers look like? Like, what's the difference between the odds of getting average and the odds of getting maximum?
Mm.
And that might govern what you want to do with different things, right? Like if you if you suddenly switch from 1d20 5% chance of getting a natural 20 to 2d12, which is what, 1 in 36, a 1 in 36 chance of getting a double six. Is that right? Yeah, 6 times 6. So 1 in 36 is, I don't know what the percent of that is, but it's not 5%,
Yeah.
right? It's lower. And so it's like half that, like 2, was it 2.1, 2.2%, something like that.
Mm.
And so as a result, it means a critical success there is more rare, so you might want to up what it does.
Mm.
And the same thing that like a failure is 5% common. Often when my players roll a natural one, I don't make anything too bad happen. Like 1 out of 7 or 8 times, I might make a mildly bad thing happen. They drop their weapon, their bow breaks, they're out of arrows, they're something like that.
Hmm.
But that's maybe 1 out of 5 or 6 times. For the most part, it's just a miss because I find it really weird to have heroic characters sliding around like the Three Stooges and Keystone Cops 5% of the time when they're 10th level adventurers. That's weird. They're not that
Yeah.
inept. So, but if it were 1 in 50 chance, then yeah, I would really punish them when that did happen because it's so rare. So you can think about those tensile strengths and the previous points I mentioned, and I think you're
Mm.
well positioned to come up with a decent amount of homebrew rules that fit your game, don't break the system, and hopefully serve some sort of purpose for you and your players.
Yeah, I was thinking of the potion as you use object, and when you're thinking of the push and pull and the medium, like you were saying, uh, right there in the middle, that kind of fixes itself when you hit about level 7 or 8, I think. Then
Mm-hmm.
the diminishing returns is really starts to hit, and I think that's perfectly fine. Like if it started hitting a little bit earlier, like around level 5, I would still
Yeah,
think, yeah, it's a good push and pull. It's a
it's
good trade off to have,
yeah,
even though it might be for a little bit longer than you would think, but it's still good.
it's yeah, it's that's like part of that thinking about the implications would be how does it scale? I guess I probably didn't touch on that, but like how does something scale? Like what might seem
Hmm.
like a good homebrew at level 1 or 2, like can grow to be seriously an issue by levels 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Like you scale something up, you go like, I think it's just too low of a hit point total for cure wounds, right? And you
Hmm.
go, cure wounds is just too low of a hit point total. And so I'm just gonna make it 2d8 instead of 1d8. It's like, well, that can have big implications when you get up to higher levels.
Yeah.
And you start stacking things, and so suddenly, like you're like, oh, you're upcasting it. It's like an extra d8. This can have wide-ranging or far-reaching consequences. So try to think of whether a rule changes. as it scales. And if it has anything to do with spell slots or spell points or, whatever system you're using, if it has to do with magic, it probably does scale. And if it also has to do with anything that the players gain competency in over a long arc, like in D&D, their proficiency bonus would be a pretty good indicator. You might want to look more carefully at like what the implications are for the rest of your game, not just based on like how they bump up against other rules, but how any given rule that you're going to tinker with or homebrew changes as the characters evolve into stronger versions of themselves. Most games at low levels, your characters are pretty squishy, and you can boost things up at a low level. Like I used to just give my players like an extra 5 or 10 hit points at level 1, I think it was.
Yeah. Oh hell, this David's first homebrew ever was when we were playing AD&D, and instead of just rolling your hit die and not adding anything or adding your constitution, Dave was just like, add a 10 to that.
Yes.
That total there, because you have 2 hit points, add 10.
Yeah, because it was like, unless you had more than 4 hit points, you might as well have, like, unless you had, like, let's say 8 or 9 hit points, which unless you were like a fighter or ranger, you weren't likely to. It's like you might as well just have 1 hit point then, because you just get hit, and almost all weapons do like a D4 plus strength mod or something like that. And it's like, so basically the difference between having 1 hit point and having like 7 or 8 hit points is ostensibly about the same. And so that just made it, and like getting to level 10 or 11 or whatever, and having an extra 10 hit points, probably not going to really break the game, because 10 hit points is far less consequential at that stage of the game. But some things can, instead of growing linearly like that, like they're a static number, they could grow exponentially. Like if something, if it paces with your proficiency bonus or something like that, then it can grow exponentially, or spell slot level or something like that could just grow very quickly. Like if you were just to say, I don't like that the warlock starts with like, he has so few spell slots. I feel like he should start with his spell slots being upcharged to level 2 instead of 1. Like then by time he has level 4th level slots that are 5th level slots, it's like, that's a pretty big jump. And it's like now all of his spells are like 5th level instead of 4th level. It's like, whoa, now he's like way more powerful than he was previously, right? He still only has 2 or 3 spell slots or whatever it is. But it's like he's got 2. The difference between having like 2 6th level and 2 5th level, or between 2 3rd level and 2 2nd level.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like 6 and 3 are big jumps for spells in power. And so the difference between 5 and 6 and between 2 and 3 is monumental, especially if all your spell slots are that way. But it's just a minor tweak. But if you're not thinking about those implications down the road, you can get yourself into trouble, paint yourself into a corner.
All right. I think that's going to do it for this episode. If any of you out there want to be like Tim and send us an email with a little question of your own, please send it to insidethegmstudio@gmail.com, where you can ask us anything. Please give us content. We'd like to talk about different shit. I want to know what you're thinking. What do you guys want to talk about? Or you can always come over and watch us live, usually every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/InsideTheGMStudio. Well, I think that's going to be it for this one then. I've been your host, Matt.
And I've been David.
A good night.